and let everyone know that we do have some items. If you'd like to check them out on that table, you're more than welcome. We do have our new event calendar over there as well if you did not already grab one. And then that door to the left will stay open if you need to use a restroom or the drinking fountain. Those are all in the lobby, so you're not locked out. So I just want to take a second to introduce our speaker tonight. Anthony Arno made national news 25 years ago when his students bicycled 2,000 miles aboard exercise bikes in the back of the classroom while learning about Route 66. Since that time, Arno has launched the Route 66 podcast, featuring talks with people living and working along the Mother Road. Tonight we have the podcast host, Anthony, here with us to share highlights from past shows, showcasing a historical look at America's Main Street as told by past guests. So please help me welcome Anthony.
Thank you so much, Amy, for hosting this. I'm really excited to share with everyone the highlights of Route 66. I'm not going to really talk about it. I'm going to have people who lived and worked along the Mother Road talk about it. Some of them are famous authors, some of them are vintage shop owners, and many of them aren't even with us anymore.
Route 66 was and is the best of us, and perhaps the worst of us, but it will always remain part of the American dream. Highway 66 is the main migrant road. 66, the long concrete path across the country, waving gently up and down on the map, from Mississippi to Bakersfield, over the red lands and the gray lands, twisting up into the mountains, crossing the divide and down into the bright and terrible desert, to the mountains again, and into the rich California valleys. 66 is the path of a people in flight, refugees from dust and shrinking land, from the thunder of tractors and shrinking ownership, from the desert's slow northward invasion, from the twisting winds that howl up out of Texas, from the floods that bring no richness to the land and steal what little richness is there. From all these, the people are in flight, and they come into 66 from tributary side roads, from the wagon tracks, and the rutted country roads. 66 is the Mother Road, the road to flight. John Steinbeck, The Grapes of Wrath, 1939.
Route 66, Route 66, ride along with the Route 66 podcast for talks with people living and working along the Mother Road, the main street of America, from Chicago to LA, bore a heavy load. Route 66, Route 66, sometimes historical paths aren't discovered until they're lost. Ride along with the Route 66 podcast.
I have a confession. I have a love affair with a road that doesn't even exist anymore. This year is the 100th anniversary of Route 66. It's more popular today than it ever was before, but it was only an active highway for 59 years. You couldn't have done this if you wanted to make it as popular. It wasn't the first highway in America, it's not the longest, and it doesn't even go coast to coast. How did I get into this? When I was in middle school, my mom had passed away from cancer. And as a college student, I bicycled across America, visiting hospitals from New York to LA. Years later, as a school teacher, I wrote a grant where I had the kids learning about geography in Route 66. This was 1999. I had the kids bicycle 2,000 miles in the back of the classroom while learning all about Route 66. In those days, there were no computers, so I had people call in the classroom on a speakerphone, including some of the authors who I'll be talking about today. I had Chicago Mayor Daley call. I even had Bobby Troop call. Does anybody know who Bobby Troop is, or was? Who was he, sir?
He is the writer, I think, the Route 66
Right. And he was telling my students the story about how he was traveling from Lancaster, Pennsylvania to Hollywood with a bunch of songs from Nat King Cole. And he wanted to write a song about a road map. And his wife leaned over and said, "Get your kicks on Route 66. Oh, that's great. He gets to California and Nat King Cole says, no, just write me another love song like you've done. He said, just record it. And my kids back then in 1999 asked Bobby Troop, well, what happened? And he goes, I'll tell you what happened. I bought my first house just on the royalties from that song alone. So this year is the centennial of Route 66. The father of Route 66 is Cyrus Stevens Avery. This guy is the man who got America out of the mud. He lived in Pennsylvania, and he went to Oklahoma in the late 1800s by covered wagon. And he probably had to help his dad push the wagon out of the mud. Eventually, he came up with the idea of a numbered highway system, but he wasn't following his own rules, because Route 66 really isn't a north-south highway or an east-west highway. You have this diagonal piece in the beginning from Chicago to St. Louis. So Cyrus Avery wanted the number 60, and so did the governor of Kentucky, and he would not budge until the very end. So here's Susan Croce Kelly, who I interviewed. She's telling us the story of Cyrus Avery and how it almost all backfired on him.
Because, you know, he was 13, and he was a kid, and the wagons were falling apart, and they were running into the mud, and they were running off the roads, and I'm sure he was involved in helping pull wagons back on the road. I would think that that would be a direct connection to saying we've got to have better roads. That was a terrible experience. But there was one road that went from Chicago to St. Louis to Tulsa to Los Angeles. It wasn't exactly north-south or east-west. Science committee, they gave it the number 60. The governor of Kentucky looked at the map and said, wait a minute, that road, the 60 number should go on the road that goes through Kentucky to the east coast. That's the road that should have number 60. Sci said, no, we've done this, it's already been approved, too bad. Well, the governor of Kentucky was not happy, and pretty soon he went to Congress. Said, now look at this, look at what they've done. They had this rule, and they're not following the rule. They're putting 60 on this crazy road that stopped in Chicago. Avery started having the road signs made that said U.S. Highway 60. But the governor of Kentucky was not silent, and finally the highway people in Washington wrote to Cy and said, look, you've got to solve this now, because if you don't, the whole highway system is going to be in jeopardy, and we need that highway system. And if they didn't take 60, what alternatives did they have? And there was another fellow at the meeting, and he looked through the numbers that were left over after they had numbered all the major roads and the secondary highways and so forth. And he said, what about 66? And so I agreed, and that was the way the Highway 66 number came to be.
Can you imagine today singing Get Your Kicks on Route 60? It's just not the same. So Route 66 is off to a slow start. 2 years into the road, 1928, they want to do something to give it a shot in the arm. Somebody suggested jokingly, let's have a foot race from Los Angeles to Chicago, or Los Angeles to Chicago to New York. In 1928, the average person earned about $1,200 a year. First prize for this was $25,000. It put Route 66 on the international map. People came from all around the world. And if you put up $200 and you made it to the end, whether or not you finished, you came in first place, you'd get that money back. So 200 people showed up for the starting line, and about 80 people reached New York. But the race promoter, C.C. Pyle, was an early promoter of a football player in the day. He was a real carnival guy. He didn't have the money. So when they reached Chicago, he would increase the distance each day. On one particular day, they ran as far as 72 miles in one day. And if they weren't in town by midnight, they were eliminated. Charles Kastner wrote a book about the Bunyan Derby, the 1928 race.
These guys were chasing a $25,000 first prize, and had the opportunity to make a lifetime worth of money for this one race. And Pyle had failed at pretty much everything he had done. He was a master promoter. About the third day, they had to climb over the California mountains down into the Mojave Desert. And then when they finished, Pyle had set them up in these tents. And he had, he assigned like, I don't know, 15 guys in one tent. But Pyle would not wash, he never thought about washing sheets or setting laundry facilities to clean their clothes. So these men would come back with these stinking sheets and stinking clothes, and then Pyle would just pull all the sheets together in a big wad, throw them in the truck, pull them out again, so you would get some guys, bloody blistered feet.
Oh, man.
I mean, it was hellish. And then by Chicago, Pyle was basically bankrupt. So his idea was to end the race as quickly as possible. So after Chicago, he increased the distance, which averaged about 35 miles a day to about 50 miles a day.
So Route 66 still today has a lot of very interesting original structures, including bridges. This is the old Chain of Rocks Bridge that stretches across the Mississippi River. It no longer is open to automobile traffic, but it's now a footpath or a bike path. And it's a 1-mile walk across the bridge. And it has an unusual bend right in the middle, a 22-degree turn. And the bridge was supposed to be demolished, but at the time of the demolition, this price of steel wasn't worth it. So here's the Great Rivers Greenway who adopted the bridge and converted it into a really popular park in the St. Louis area.
The Chain of Rocks Bridge was built in 1929 by local entrepreneurs who collected tolls from people crossing the bridge. It's a mile long, and the 1-mile bridge has a 22-degree bend in the middle, and that was to prevent boat captains from having to navigate the bridge piers and the water intake towers at the same time. But for everybody who's driven across it, there are stories of, the trailer couldn't make that bend with the oncoming traffic, and so everybody had to back up at the same time. Around the time that the bridge was in operation, there was also an amusement park up on the bluff overlooking the bridge on the Missouri side. That amusement park was called Chain Rocks Park. Was open from 1927 to 1978. There are 2 structures in the river just south of the old Chain Rocks Bridge. They absolutely look like tiny castles. One was built in 1894 and the other was built in 1915 to draw drinking water from the Mississippi River. The Interstate 270 bridge was built, and once it opened, the old Chain Rocks Bridge became obsolete. So in 1975, demolition was planned for the old Chain Rocks Bridge, but at that time, the value of scrap steel was so low that tearing down the structure was determined not to be cost effective, and that's ultimately what saved the bridge.
Does anybody remember Burma Shave? Yeah. So before my time, Burma Shave was a ready-made cream that came in a jar that if you were going to shave, you didn't need to lather it up. You didn't need to whip it up with a shaving brush. You would just take it out of the jar and put it on your face and be done with it. So I interviewed Clinton B. Odell, whose grandfather started the Burma Shave Company. And his dad, Clinton's dad, came up with this brilliant marketing campaign of advertising along the road a series of 6 signs with clever little silly jingles or public service announcements. So here's one that his dad thought of. Free, a trip to Mars for 900 empty jars. Burma Shave. So some grocer up in Michigan collected 900 jars, and he wanted his trip to Mars. He went to Mars, Germany. So Clinton is no longer with us, but when I interviewed him, he was like 78 years old. He's going to talk about working as a college student, putting up these posts, and how it just wasn't for him. But at the time, when typical automobiles only traveled 40 miles an hour, you could read these signs. But once the interstate came, it wasn't practical.
In my college years, I worked a couple of summers and was part of the installation crew that put the signs or installed the signs. You found out rather quickly what kind of physical condition you were in. It was, first of all, it was hard work, hand dig the post holes, and then a couple of summers on the road putting the signs up. And my father was the one that originated the berm-shaped road signs, a set of rhyming signs, and that's how he initially came up with a set of signs that he suggested to my grandfather that they start using, and my grandfather had to be talked into that and finally gave my dad $200 at the time, which was a fair amount of money, to buy a bunch of used boards. That they were in a series of 6 spaced specifically apart. So at the time that someone riding in an automobile at the time could read them easily. They were beautiful for their time. Great advertising for the time of our growth in this country. Really, these signs went up in like the late 1920s and were taken down in the early 1960s. And the reason they finally came down was because of the super highways were being installed. What have you, it made them so that people were moving too fast and they couldn't read the signs. And so that's when the signs finally came down.
So a lot of people like traveling the Mother Road, just checking out the vintage gas stations. And Illinois has a ton of them. But this one is in Shamrock, Texas, in the panhandle of Texas. It's a beautiful Art Deco building that, if you've seen the movie Cars, it's based on the design of Ramon's Body Shop. So Elvis used to sit here and have lunch, and I was there last year and I saw, well, there was a cardboard cutout, but there's a cardboard cutout of Elvis at the booth he used to sit at. Here's Crystal Hermeischer talking about the station.
Tuesday, March 31st, 1936. To J.C. Berry, Shamrock Architect, goes the credit for designing of the modern tower at the intersection of U.S. Highway 66 and 83 in the north part of the city, which will be open for public inspection on Wednesday. The Shamrock Texan newspaper.
It is just 100% Art Deco. It's literally, you're looking at a piece of history and stepping back into time. So when you see that, you're seeing something that the same people in 1936 saw. I mean, it is restored back to pristine condition of 1936. They built the U-Drop, and it was kind of the town center there that they had opened up a gas station, and it was a place that they had the bus station. And if you talk to any of the people from that era that remember, going into the bus stations or going into the diner, and they would eat every meal there. We had people as famous as Elvis Presley stop and eat breakfast there. He was kind of a regular as he came through. He stopped there.
So Route 66 played a big role during World War II. You drive down the road, like you see abandoned motels and buildings, and you wonder, what's the story behind that building? This is in Flagstaff. This is an old motel that's for sale. But this is where one of the original 29 code talkers were recruited for World War II. So there were 250 code talkers. Only 2 of them are still living today. One of them is Peter McDonald. He was recruited, he's Navajo, as a code talker. He was a key figure during World War II in Iwo Jima. And he's going to be talking about how he came home from the war and he couldn't tell anybody what he did. He later went on to work for the Howard Hughes as a ballistic engineer. This clip starts out with the realtor talking about this motel and how, there's a rich history behind it, but nobody's interested in making it into a possible museum.
I have sold a motel on Route 66 a couple years ago. The guy that owns the El Pueblo, he wants to know if I could sell his motel. started telling me about the history of the motel, and then I found out that it was the original location where Philip Johnson recruited the Navajos to develop the code.
I was born near today's Four Corners. My family were moving from our winter sheep camp in Utah. We were nomads, living with livestock. I joined the United States Marine Corps in 1944 at age 15. Our home training of storytelling was one of the key elements to becoming a Navajo code talker. Navajo Code School was a top secret project, which was over 600 words altogether, were subject to memory only. We were not allowed to carry a copy of code words in our pockets. 240 Navajo code talkers participated, over 2,000 messages sent on Iwo Jima during the first 48 hours of the landing. We remained silent about what we did. We were told not to tell anyone what we did in the war until the code was officially declassified. Till 1968, 23 years after World War II ended. All we were told to say was, we were radio man and nothing else.
So if you listen to that episode, he'll give you some examples. Like if you memorize the words, the horse is thirsty, that might have been code for the enemy is coming up on the right side of us. Another part of World War II on the Mother Road, Route 66, is in the Mojave Desert. Route 66 went through this town of Goffs, which today is nothing. But during the war preparation, Patton trained 15,000 men for 3 months there before he went on to Africa. And this guy was a retired geologist. He purchased an old school in Goffs and made it into a museum. And 60 years later, he's walking through the desert and he sees something shiny in the ground. It's a set of dog tags. And he's going to find out who belongs to these dog tags before the internet. And lo and behold, he finds the guy, and he's still living.
In 1942, it gives me goosebumps, Anthony. It really does. In 1942, 16,000 troops showed up right there. 16,000 troops and 7,000 vehicles were there for 90 days. That's before they went on to destiny. And I looked over and there laid in the sand, unmistakable, a complete set of dog tags. So we picked him up and looked at him, and here was this guy's name and his army number. And so I sat down one day with the telephone and the dog tags, and come to find out the man whose dog tags we had was still alive. I had him on the phone. Oh, God. He was so thrilled.
Yeah.
And amazed that anybody cared.
A lot of people don't realize this, but during World War II, we had POW camps along Route 66. And this one was in Miami, Oklahoma, but it's pronounced Miami. Whoop, I'm sorry, wrong slide. This is, yeah, I'm sorry, it is. It was Fort Reno POW camp, not Miami. And there were German and Italian young kids there, sent there about 1,200. These were young kids captured in Africa. They literally adopted the town of Fort Reno. They established a library, they built a church. Tragically, a couple of them were killed either from earlier injuries, but there was one soldier from Italy that a tree fell on him, and he was buried there in Oklahoma. It wasn't until 60, 70 years later did his family realize he was buried in Oklahoma. And Caroline wrote a book about his body being returned back home to Italy.
His family only knew he was a POW and that he was considered lost with no formal record of death. Francisco was born in Italy in 1912, captured in North Africa, and it was interesting, the backhoe began to excavate the gravesite, and they would go down a few feet, and then by hand they would shovel to see what they could find. Finally, about 46 inches down, they started finding wooden pieces of the casket. After all the pieces and the skeleton, which they could find, were placed in the box, one trowel of earth was put in it. This symbolized that part of him will forever remain in Oklahoma. And then 4 of the military men lifted the Ziegler box by the handles, and they take it to the waiting funeral home van, where it was placed on a plane to Italy. A rubbing of the tombstone was done to be given to the sister in Italy, as his military stone will remain at Fort Reno.
So now we go to Miami, Oklahoma, spelled just like Miami, Florida, but pronounced Miami. So in Miami, Oklahoma during the war, these young cadets from England came to learn how to fly the airplanes. Tragically, 13 of them were killed in training accidents, and at the time they couldn't return their bodies back home. So they were buried in Miami, Oklahoma, and there was a woman there, a local resident, who told the mother of these kids back home in England, "I will look after your children." And Mrs. Hill every week would visit the cemetery and put flowers out for them. And then when she died, her last request was to be buried alongside these gentlemen.
Mrs. Hill, she was a dear, dear lady. She loved all of the cadets. She just had such a big heart for these kids, that were coming across the world. And she took them in like her own son. She attended every one of the funerals. She had a beautiful garden at her home. And she would pull flowers up, bulbs up, weekly. And she would maintain these British graves for years. She did this for over 40 years, never missed a beat.
So she's buried alongside these 15 cadets. Who decided to bury her alongside the cadets? Whose idea was that?
It was hers, beyond a shadow of a doubt. She insisted that she was to have her and her husband buried along at the end of those graves.
There's a lot of old buildings on Route 66 that will never open again, but people like to preserve them. This one is in the Painted Desert of Arizona. This was an old curio shop or an old gas station that never had running water, never had electricity, but yet this guy was able to pump gas and create his own source of energy. So it was falling apart, and there was a group that preserved the building. It's not going to open again, but this building is in the middle of nowhere, 7 miles today from the nearest paved road.
That building, I can assure you that if we had not intervened by purchasing that property and basically propping that building back up and restoring it, it would have fallen down by now. I can guarantee you that. The Painted Desert Trading Post was established in the 40s, and it was a gas station. It was a curio shop. They sold rugs and jewelry and pottery and all sorts of stuff, and they also had fuel. They had to generate their own electricity. They had to pump their own water right there from a well. They were totally self-sustenant, and there was no utilities ever brought in there. So it went dormant when the interstate came in. We're not ever going to reopen it, and at that point they just had to hang it up. But what would happen is over the last 15 years, cattle have been allowed to migrate into this area and walk around the trading post. Just that act alone, with them walking around the trading post, caused enough damage where the foundation eroded and rolled out from underneath the trading post, causing the corners of the building to slump over. After the building lost its roof, and then the structure started to go. We spent a lot of money and a lot of time shoring up that building. We just want to make sure that future generations of roadies and tourists have the ability to come out and see this old relic for what it looked like.
So one of the most popular towns along the Route 66 is in Oatman, Arizona, way up in the mountains. At the turn of the century, Oatman used to be one of the biggest gold mining towns in the world. And during its heyday, they had burros or donkeys in the mines. But after everything died out, they didn't know what to do with these animals. They're protected, and today, if you go to this town, you might be harassed by the local burros. And that's a major draw, a major attraction, especially for like Europeans that come here and they're looking for America from yesterday.
The burros, they came here with the Spaniards and that were finding the gold, and they would go down in the gold mine and live their whole life down there. Oh, probably not long after 1915, they mechanized and electrified the mines, so they didn't need the burros anymore. So what did they do? They just took them out of the mines and turned them loose. The herds of burros double every 4 years. They hardly have any enemies. They just have doubled and doubled and doubled and doubled until right now we have quite a few burros. These mountains here are supposed to have 400, and I would guess they have over 2,000. The BLM is in charge of them, but they made a law in the federal law that was to protect the wild horses and burros. We like the burros. We're kind of animal people. The burros like people. They really do. The wild ones will watch up on the hill, and then for you thing you know, they'll be down here in the street begging for food. So, but there's too many of them right now, and people are getting hurt by not paying attention and not realizing they are wild animals. They're not petting zoo.
Does anybody know what a Harvey girl is? Or a Harvey girl was? In the late 1870s, Fred Harvey came to America, and he established a system of high-end restaurants that people traveling west by train would stop at and they'd eat. So you might be taking a train out west, and when you stop through, say, Santa Fe or Albuquerque, you would place your order. And when you got there to the train station, your food would be there ready and waiting with beautiful linens, beautiful china. Because prior to that, you had 30 minutes in a rest in the train station, and if the coffee was garbage, nothing you can do, and as soon as you left, they poured the coffee back in the coffee maker. So these two ladies were Harvey girls in the late 1950s. The company went out of business in the early 1960s. Fred Harvey was very specific. If you were a Harvey girl, he only hired ladies who were single. They wore uniforms that would replicate like a nurse's uniform. And Judy Garland years ago did a movie called The Harvey Girls. So here they are talking about their experience as Harvey girls.
Are they twins?
The Harvey Girls legend as told by surviving Fred Harvey workers.
We knew nothing about the Harvey Girls, the history, nothing.
Well, I'll tell you, I really liked it. At the beginning, I didn't like it because that was my first job.
So we were breakfast and lunch. We had our own apartment. We walked every morning early and entered through a side back door. We weren't allowed to come through the front. Well, they were very strict, yes. You could not come out of the kitchen without your tray overhead on your hand, even if it was a coffee cup.
Your shoes had to be shined, and your nails had to be clean, and jewelry.
And we were taught to serve on the right and pick up on the left. We'd have to come 30 minutes early just to fold all the napkins. I appreciate a waitress because they know it's hard work.
Yeah, so you asked if they were twins. They were twins. And if you listen to that full episode, they were from Minnesota. And when they graduated high school, they went to the Southwest. And the dad said, if you come back home, I'll buy you a horse. And they've been there ever since. You know, a lot of these old train stations, once people were driving by cars and travel changed and Route 66 became declassified in 1985, what do you do with these old train stations? This one is in Winslow, Arizona, and it was for a brief time Amtrak's Southeastern headquarters, but after that they were going to knock it down. This particular entrepreneur purchased the train station and had it converted into a destination hotel. So here's Alan talking about, you know, it would have been easier to just knock it down and start over, but nobody wants to come to a brand new hotel on Route 66.
My wife Tina and I just drove out to look at it, and it was magnificent, and so we fell in love with the building, and ultimately we ended up buying it from the railroad. So I don't really recall thinking much about Route 66 until I bought La Posada, which of course was the fanciest hotel on the Southwest in Route 66, and it was really then that I started learning that history. It was the masterpiece of Mary Coulter, who I think is America's most important and influential woman architect. The building itself was so magnificent. It was the last of the great Fred Harvey Santa Fe Railway hotels. This beautiful, enormous Spanish colonial revival building, a very eccentric, rambling structure. The gardens had been abandoned and paved over, but the interior had been gutted. All the beautiful murals had been torn out. All the furniture was auctioned off. So there really wasn't much to discover on the interior. When you restore an old building like this, what you have to do is take the old shell and essentially create a new building inside of it. Certainly every bit as expensive or more expensive than building a new building. But the difference is that you have this wonderful patina and the story that you get from an old building, the history of the old building, that a new building just can never come close to.
So another motel, which was in St. Louis, was the Coral Court Motel. This was the no-tell motel. You could rent your room out for 4 hours, and next door to your room was a private garage. So if you were doing something inappropriate, nobody would know who you are. So this was a historic building, but yet when the owner died, they knocked it down. So here's Shelley Graham, the author of Tales from the Coral Court Motel, talking about John Carr, who owned this motel. He was a multi-millionaire, and he would be taking care of the weeds in the garden, but he didn't want people to know that he was the owner of the motel.
And when I saw the Coral Court Motel, you know, my jaw dropped. It was just so beautiful, this motor court from the 1940s in the middle of all this, you know, suburbia. There was nothing like it anywhere. And to think about these little cottages with the private garages, it was just incredible. Art Deco, golden tiles, glass blocks, and you didn't see any cars because they were all in their private garages. John Carr is a really interesting character. When he moved into St. Louis County, he wanted to open, you know, the best motel in St. Louis. He would be out there raking leaves or picking up dandelions, and he said, if anyone asks, tell them I'm the gardener. You know, nobody knows he's this, you know, multi-millionaire who owned the motel. And he was like in his 70s, caring about the motel and trying to maintain it to the very best that he could. But also, the second reason design for the Coral Court was the death of the original owner, John Carr, in 1984. And he's the one who loved it, who cared about it.
The Alvado Motel is a motel where the person who redeveloped it took each of the small rooms and he made them into little boutiques. So local people could sell t-shirts or jewelry, whatever they want to sell. Here he is talking about when he did the renovation, he found a note buried in the wall from the 1930s when the building was originally constructed.
For me, I always talk about old real estate having souls.
you know, every time you take a layer of paint off or do this, that you're bringing back this soul, that it's getting happy and it's coming back to life. And it's a weird thing. I think about that a lot when we're doing these projects about the soul being restored back and, you know, becoming happy and vibrant and relevant again. And you never get that with new construction. It just doesn't always, it just never seems to be there when you finish a new building that you start from scratch. One of the most unique finds that we came across was in one of the walls. We found a whiskey bottle, Green River whiskey, and it had a note inside of it. Let's pull that thing out. So we got a pair of tweezers and we're actually dig this note out. And it was from 1937.
Wow.
I think it was April of 1937. And it was signed by 3 gentlemen, and I don't recall their names, but it said, "We built this place."
Wow.
And they had, so they put it in a bottle and they stuck it inside one of the walls and then finished the wall. So we, I mean, that was the find of the project.
So one of the darker sides of Route 66 is the story of the treatment of black travelers. And I added this slide. I was out here in the springtime talking to a couple of authors, and they said, "Do you talk much about the Green Book?" So I added this slide. Candace Taylor was a contributing author to this book, which you can check out today at the Public Library. And she could not believe that there was no mention of black travel along Route 66. And she discovered that half of the counties on Route 66 had a certain type of unwritten law that what they called the sundown towns. After 6 o'clock, if you were black, you had to be out of the town, or you could have been arrested or harassed. So here she is talking about it, and she's also going to talk a little bit about her stepdad, who used to drive around with a hat in the back of the car, which she didn't know the story about until she wrote this book.
I was amazed when I stumbled onto the Route 66 research and found that there were these sundown towns. I thought, well, how in the world did black people travel Route 66 if that was the case? Because that was news to me. I had never known there were such things as sundown towns. Half of the counties on Route 66 were all white communities. If you were black, you were either escorted out after 6 p.m. It was not safe for you to be in these towns. Some would ring a bell alerting the local laborers and black people who worked in the town that it was time for them to go. The Green Book was a travel guide that was published explicitly for black people to travel during a time when we were largely shut out of public places. So the Green Book, and yes, the height of Route 66, the heyday of Route 66, anything you think you might need on the road, it was like a black yellow pages. They had everything from, doctors were in the Green Book, funeral homes, department stores, hair salons and barber shops, tailors. My stepfather, Ron, he was 7 years old, and he was with his parents, and they were pulled over by sheriff. And his father turned around to him and said, don't say a word. And the sheriff comes to the window, and, the first thing he asks his father is, whose car is this? Who are these people with you? And, where are you going? And his father said that it was his employer's car. And he looked at his wife, and he said, "That's the maid, and her son is in the back, and I'm driving him home." And the sheriff said, "Well, where's her hat?" And he said, "Oh, it's hanging right in the back, officer." And Ron looked over, and there was this black hat, a chauffeur's hat, hanging there that had been there as long as he could remember. But he never understood what it was, because nobody had ever worn it. The sheriff waved him on and said, "Okay, go ahead."
So Route 66 benefited from the Bunyan Derby, the Grapes of Wrath when Steinbeck said it's called the Mother Road, the song Get Your Kicks on Route 66, and I'm amazed the Kenosha Public Library has the DVD of the TV show. So you can check this out too. But the TV show lasted for 4 years, 116 episodes. of these two guys driving up and down Route 66 looking for adventure. The truth is, only 2 or 3 shows were ever filmed on Route 66.
This here's private property. Now you get that and bolt your tail out of here the same way you come in, before I get back. You need a lesson in manners, boy.
So that was actually, it's on here, it's the first episode, Black November. That's the episode. So muffler men, or these fiberglass giants, were also popular on Route 66. They're 16, 18, 20-foot tall fiberglass giants that businesses would use to promote their business. Not too far from here, you might have heard of the Gemini giant, and there's a bunch of them around on the Mother Road. However, during the heyday of Route 66, Texaco used these giants at their gas stations. And I interviewed Joel Baker, who restores them, and here he's going to tell us about a marketing campaign with the Texaco Big Friend, how they were all around the Texaco stations along Route 66 until something happened and then they all disappeared.
Yeah, you know, my favorite muffler end would have to be the Texaco Big Friend. 1966, they started this campaign really featuring their friendly service and the serviceman that would, you know, not only fill your car's tank with gas, but he would, you know, check your fluids and clean your windshield. And they were running this TV commercial, and they ordered 300 giants with the option to order 2,700 more. Huge order. And so International Fiberglass started making these Texaco Big Friends, we call them. And, you know, the campaign launched, these guys were shipped out on a trailer, and he could be easily tipped up and displayed at the gas station, and then laid back down in the trailer and moved on to the next location for the next promotion. These guys were deployed all across America, and it was a short-lived program. We don't exactly know what happened. We're guessing one of these giants fell over. Texaco saw a liability issue. We've also been told that the area reps got tired of moving the giants and putting them together, and they were also so large, you know, 23 feet, that they were often hard to store. And by mid-1967, they were being removed, and Texaco told all their stations to have them destroyed. And today, only 4 of these giants remain. So they're, you know, the giant and then the story behind it, you know, such a unique story, and that's what makes that particular giant my favorite out of all of them.
Ladies, what's the most romantic thing your husband has purchased for you for an anniversary? This guy has you beat, guys. Sorry. After Hugh Davis retired from the zoo, Tulsa Zoo, as the director, he built an 80-foot gray whale, cement whale, for his wife. It took him 2 years to build, and he had no experience with concrete or cement work. So here's Blaine Davis talking about his dad and his idea of building this whale for his wife.
He had to do something. My father was not one that would sit down and do nothing. But what gave him the idea for a whale? My mother was always interested in whales, so he just decided one day, I'll fix that. And he started sketching on a piece of paper what he wanted to do. He ended up building the whale, which is a fairly good-sized project. He'd never done any concrete work before. The story goes that he gave it to my mother. You cannot give something like that as a surprise. I mean, it's obvious he's building it right in front of you. And she saw this going on. It took 2 years to build it. And he one of these. Now, when it was in its heyday and it was a swimming hole, you would have 100 to 125 people there at the same time. There's no swimming anymore, and it was quite a fun spot. Crowds that size were normal here during its heyday.
Probably more popular than the Blue Whale is the Cadillac Ranch in Amarillo, Texas. So popular, Bruce Springsteen even wrote a song about it. 54 years ago, there was a hippie group in San Francisco called the Ant Farm. And Chip Lord was a member of that group. He's the only surviving member today. He's 84 years old. He was infatuated with cars and Cadillacs. So he came up with an idea of burying 10 Cadillacs in the ground with the tail fin sticking out, similar to like a Stonehenge type attraction. Well, he did it, he went home, and he could not believe that today over 1 million people a year visit the Cadillac Ranch and they spray paint the cars. So if you listen to the full episode, he's quite a character. His last car he buried in the ground on a Friday after he was done using it. He left the oil in it and everything. I asked him, what about the medallion? He said, I'm looking at it right now in my studio.
Chip, what's the secret to the Cadillac Ranch for over 50 years? What did you get right with the Cadillac Ranch?
I think the simplicity of the idea, the idea of translating what had been a diagram could be easily changed into a public accessible sculpture. So when we set out to find the 10 models, it took maybe 2.5 months, but it wasn't really that difficult. But we had, we hired a backhoe operator, and he showed up on Monday, and we said, we're going to dig a hole this deep and this wide, and we're going to push a car into it. Our intention and desire was to make the object, to make the sculpture, and just to have the experience ourselves of seeing it, seeing what it would look like. Fresh, in the ground, no graffiti.
Well, today there's decades and decades of graffiti on those cars. How does that make you feel?
Well, that wasn't in our minds, that was unexpected, and I guess it's inevitable, but it's made it into something completely different, and it's almost unrecognizable as vehicles now.
So after that, Chip went on to do an Evel Knievel type stunt at the Cow Palace in San Francisco, where he souped up a Cadillac and he drove it through 100 TVs that were on fire. Probably the most dramatic person I've interviewed on the podcast is Marilyn Leisner, who was the mayor of Times Beach, just north of St. Louis. She was the mayor of this cottage town, about 2,000 residents. And in those days, with the dirt roads, it was acceptable to spray used motor oil on the dirt to keep the dust down.
Oh, yeah.
She hired a guy who used tainted oil which had dioxins in it. And after he had sprayed the roads, a couple of weeks later, the cattle and the wildlife were showing up dead. So in the 1980s, when President Reagan was in office, he met with her, and they decided to purge the entire town. So all 2,000 people had to leave the town. 800 homes had to be buried into the ground. Everybody's car, the police cars, even the water tower.
Times Beach, 2,242 residents, 801 families. Russell Bliss.
I swear to all of you, I had no idea this material was bad.
Every house, every car, and even the water tower. An entire Route 66 community purged. $200 million in cleanup costs. 35 years later.
A talk with the final mayor of Times Beach, Marilyn Leisner.
Times Beach was a very interesting, happy community that was situated along Route 66. Over the years, it turned into a very thriving community. It was a place where you could let your children out to play, and there were mothers all over the community.
What would you do? Episode number 20 on the Route 66 podcast.
Probably the most famous corner in America is on Route 66 in Winslow, Arizona. From the song Take It Easy, I'm standing on the corner in Winslow, Arizona. What a fine sight to see. It's a girl, my lord, in a flatbed Ford, slowing down to take a look at me. So what they did was, they were looking for an artist to create a sculpture of a person playing a guitar. This is Ron, he's from Montana. He came up with a crazy idea. They flew him to Winslow with a 2-foot clay model, and he realizes his design is not the best. So he's got to change it. He quickly changes it, and they hired him.
And my wife called me up and she said, hey, you got a really strange email. Somebody from Winslow, Arizona sent you an email. And I said, oh yeah, down on the corner in Winslow, Arizona. She goes, actually, yeah. And I said, well, what do you mean? So she said that there was a committee in Winslow that was looking for a sculptor to create an image from that song. I flew down to Arizona with a 2-foot tall statue that I had made in clay where he was playing the guitar. I met with the committee and they said, well, we're going to place it at street level. And I said, well, this will never work because the handle of the guitar is sticking out. Somebody at night, if they're riding a bike or jogging, they're going to knock their teeth out or hit their neck or get hurt. And so in front of the committee, I broke the arm off of the clay and took the guitar and balanced it off of his foot, because a guitar player who's standing around would never let his guitar touch the ground. And so with clay, you can move things. And so I think that surprised everybody that I was able to do it very quickly. And so that's how it wound up in the position that it's in today.
So people drive Route 66, 2,400 miles. They get to Santa Monica, California, and they take a picture of the end of the trail sign on the pier. Only problem is, Route 66 never ended on the Santa Monica pier. But if you owned a small shack selling t-shirts and you put a sign out there, they will come.
Now you should know the pier has never actually been the official end. It's always been the traditional end. Many people never went to the official end. They saw the ocean and they just traveled 2,500 miles. So they would continue down to that intersection. From there they could see the pier. Now if you've just driven 2,500 miles and you have the opportunity to drive onto the pier and put your tires over, you know, the ocean blue, and in those days people could drive onto the pier. I always thought, like, why is there nothing to mark Route 66 on the pier? I mean, it just didn't make sense. But nobody knew the history. So the sign that you see on the pier never existed until I built it. Truth is, we weren't putting it back up. We were putting it up for the first time. And neither of us knew that. You know, if you run a marathon and there's no finish line at the end, it's very anticlimactic. So I knew that if I gave people a finish line, they would come.
So it's been 40 years since Route 66 was last an active highway. Why is it so popular today? My last two slides are the people who made it so popular. This is Michael Wallace, and he wrote this book, The Mother Road, Route 66, in 1985, when the road was decommissioned. It didn't get much traction, but a couple of years later, John Lasseter made the movie Toy Story. And then he went on vacation with his family. And he said, you know, I got to do a movie about this Route 66. And he did the movie Cars. And he wanted to know more about it, so he called up Michael Wallace, and Michael Wallace took them on a tour of the Mother Road. They loved Michael Wallace so much, he became the voice of the sheriff in the movie Cars. So again, kudos to the Kenosha Library, because this DVD, if you look at the director's cut, they'll talk about the trip. So here's Michael Wallace talking about getting the call from John Lasseter and taking the Pixar crew on Route 66. And then he's going to talk about like what it was like for them on the road.
John Lasseter out of the Pixar studio really wants to talk to you. So I called Lasseter. He said, Michael, I've read your book many, many times, Route 66, The Mother Road, and I not only adore it, but I piled all my sons and my wife into a big van, and we traveled the road, and I'm convinced now that I need to make a movie. And the movie, I see it in my head, is about a hotshot race car who's just full of himself, an arrogant little race car. And he gets lost. And he ends up on an old two-lane American road. And he finds out that it's okay to be a race car. That's fine. But it's also good to sometimes slow down. And there's only one road that can serve as that canvas. That's our power. And that's your road. That's Route 66. And we set out, and I said, the first thing you're going to do is we're going to all drive the road. All is meaning the creative team, producers, directors, animators, writers, everybody. We're going to drive the road. I'm going to load it in them in big black rented Cadillacs, connected them with microphones, and we traveled the road. It was just a tremendous experience, and those are the memories that I carry with me. A lot of them humorous. They didn't know what roadkill was until I showed them a dead armadillo. And even then they didn't quite believe it. They said, what is it? Maybe it's sleeping.
And then we have The Guardian of Route 66. If you want to check this book out, this is Angel Delgadillo. He's still alive today, 99 years old. When my kids bicycled across, learned about Route 66 in 1999, he actually called in also. Angel was a barber from Seligman, Arizona. And when Route 66 bypassed Seligman in 1985, his town died. But he wouldn't sit still. He tried to get people to come to the town. They ignored him, ignored him, ignored him. But slowly, 10 years later, people began to become curious about Seligman, Arizona. And he established a historic association for the state of New Mexico, of Arizona. Then after that, other states followed. And today, there are 8 states with Route 66. Each state has a separate organization to help promote tourism, especially like this year with the Centennial. This guy is a rock star. He is so famous that I'm going to show you a clip of a commercial that aired during the Super Bowl for Chevrolet. And then you're going to see people coming into a shop by the busload.
I've lived on Route 66 for 84 years. When the interstate opened, my town died overnight. I fought 10 years so the world would never forget America's Main Street.
Just as the train and railroad shaped America, so did Chevy and Route 66. At Chevy, we're moving forward without forgetting the past. That's why we celebrate heroes like Angel, the guardian of Route 66.
At that moment, they finished building the freeways for 100 miles between Kingman and Ashford. We knew that we were going to be bypassed, but we, the people of Seligman then, did not know how devastating it was going to be. Believe it or not, I begin to talk about how to get the economy back. We were totally ignored. I mean, totally ignored. But we did not take no for an answer. We stayed on it and on it and on it. But those people in Phoenix didn't know. They didn't know who they were up against. We were people that grew up in hard times. It is so sad to be forgotten. I remember the 10 long years when the world literally forgot about us. We did not exist. 100-mile stretch. The state didn't even put signs up, leaving flight staff. At first, I was so sad, then I got so angry at my government, they didn't provide nothing for us. After we were bypassed, we became a depressed area. My gosh, things got so goddamn tough. But there's an old saying, when the going gets tough, the tough gets going. And this is the way I was brought up, not to give up. After we gave rebirth to Route 66, things have been so beautiful. I have grown up by leaps and bounds in my mind, by being observant of people, appreciating people. I have learned to appreciate what I have, not what I don't have. And I happen to have everything. A beautiful wife, I have it all, and I know it.
So I hope today I was able to show you a little clip of the history with the 24 episodes out of 70 featuring the Mother Road. Thank you for inviting me. Are there any questions I can answer?
How many times have you driven it?
Every year during the summer.
Oh, you're brave.
Usually I lead tours on it,
Mhm.
but this year I'm doing something different. So I've done it in the spring, now, and then in the fall. And what I enjoy doing is coming to public libraries like the Kenosha Library here, because so many people are curious about it. But earlier today, I was in Minneapolis at an independent living center. And those are the people who I like hanging out with, because they tell me stories about Route 66. So the one with the private garage, in the springtime I was out in Arizona, and some old guy says, I stayed there on my honeymoon. So I did the math, and sure enough, I guess you could have stayed there on your honeymoon. So I'm sorry if I said it was a seedy place and no-tell motel. Any other questions?
What do you find the most memorable of all of the people you've talked to?
Well, that's a good question. My wife's not here, so I'll tell you. She didn't like Oatman because it was too dusty. It's a dirt road. When she did the road with me, she did half of it, and I took her to the fancy destination hotels, like the Santa Fe, Winslow. But the truth is, if you're going to travel Route 66, you have to be used to staying in a 1970s motel with a shower where the tiles are discolored, not the Holiday Inn. And if you've ever been to the Jersey Shore, like down in Wildwood, that's what a lot of the motels are like. And people would never put up with that. They want like a modern Holiday Inn. But my favorite part is probably the Chain of Rocks Bridge, because nobody knows about it. All the European tourists, they come to St. Louis and they want to see the arch. But yet that Chain of Rocks Bridge is a gem. Walking a mile across the Mississippi River with no cars. So, any other questions?
So how do you get to that chain of rocks if you're coming on the freeway? If you're coming down 55?
It's very tricky because to get onto it from the Illinois side, there's a canal. And it's
so
not
you
the
should go
safest
to the
area.
Missouri side
And they just redid it. If you listen to that whole episode,
Uh-huh.
St. Louis has a security guard at the gate. It's a gated parking lot that you have to be out of there by the end of the day. And they have picnic areas. If you listen to the rest of the episode, that wasn't always the safest spot. And, you know, they redid it and they opened it up about a year or two ago. So it's really nice today, but it wasn't always the safest spot to visit, the Chain of Rocks Bridge. Yes?
Where do you find the podcast?
Wherever you listen to podcasts, or are you asking how to find the podcast? Or if you have a phone, you can take a picture of this link right there. So I gave you a sheet with all the episodes, and you know, I have to say, I'm trying to do this in under an hour, and every day since I started last week, I've been cutting stuff. So like, I cut down 1 or 2 motels. There's a Munger Moss Motel, where today in Lebanon, Missouri, the U.S. Post Office came out with 8 stamps this year, and one of them is the sign, the neon sign of the Munger Moss Motel. When I was in New Mexico earlier this year in the spring, where Buddy Holly recorded, I did a whole episode on the Fireballs. Anybody remember the Fireballs, Sugar Shack, the #1 song for 6 weeks in 1964 in Clovis, New Mexico? So I interviewed that guy, and I'm like, how come I never heard of you? I'll tell you why, Anthony. 2 words, the Beatles. We had the #1 song in January of 1964. The Beatles came to the Ed Sullivan Show, and that was it. So the biggest hit we ever had was Sugar Shack. But he's still around today. So it's like, you know, I joke around the Rolling Stones. You have to pick 20 songs. Out of 70 episodes, it's hard. You have to pick it.
Did you ever stay at the Blue Swallow?
Oh yes, the Blue Swallow is just like the Coral Court. It's in Tucumcari, New Mexico. Yep. I did a show
Near
on that.
Dells, did you?
Yes.
Dells?
Yes. So the Blue Swallow you can go to today, and when you rent out a room, if you have a small enough car, you can pull it into the garage. But a lot of those vintage motels, there's only 10 rooms, 12 rooms. And with the Centennial, they're already scooped up. But yes. So you really do know Route 66. Good for you.
Only to Holbrook, Arizona.
Okay. And then there's the teepees,
Yeah.
the Wigwam motels. There's one in California and one in Arizona. So yes. Yeah. Yes.
Were the students mad that they had to ride those bikes?
You know what's funny? I can tell you this. That was 25 years ago. That if the kid came into my room and they didn't do their homework, give me 5 miles. Okay. But then by the end of the year, if you were a behavior issue or you didn't do your homework, give me 5 miles. No, Mr. Arno, please, no. I could never do that today. I would be arrested. But we did that at the end of the school year that year. The kids came in after school just to get the 2,000 miles.
And now they're all spin teachers.
Yeah, right? Yeah. What's funny is, thank you for coming. Some of those pictures from when I biked across America, I joined newspapers.com, and I was amazed to find pictures of me at 20 years old on the internet, which is where I got those pictures from. So, yeah.
So have any of those kids, since they're now well into adulthood, I assume they were what, were they junior high?
They were 5th grade, 10 years old.
Okay, 10 years old. Have they driven the route?
Not that I know of, but I can tell you every so often I have students come back to me. Not that year, but we talk about stuff. So when my son was in college, he dated a girl, and on the first date, are you related to Mr. Arno? Yeah, it's my dad. Oh my gosh, I gotta call my mom up and tell her. So my son didn't tell me that until 6 months later. He's like, yeah, she was one and done. But I knew you were gonna pester me about her. And yeah, so, you know, as a teacher, I've always loved doing science. So I retired from teaching 5th grade in 2019 after 32 years, and I got bored, so I went back to school. So now I'm an elementary STEM teacher in the adjoining state. So the kids come to me, I give them duct tape and cardboard and Legos, and we build, And then 45 minutes later, okay guys, see you in 7 days, out the door. So, yeah. Well, thank you again for coming. If you have any other stories you want to share.
I just want to ask, because on your scholarship thing, I remember that at the end of every episode, you play that Mother Road
That's
song.
a great
That's
question.
a really good song.
Do you know that I was giving out $1,000 a year through Patreon? I have people who listen to the show and they pledge $5 or $25, and I would give out $1,000 a year. So at the end of the show, there's a girl, a college girl, a couple of years ago who wrote a song called Remember, and I play that as the outro. Remember the Native Americans, don't forget them the way you forgot Route 66. But sadly, I didn't get any takers for the scholarship program, so I don't do that anymore.
Oh, okay.
I got one person that gave me a picture of them on a motorcycle, but that wasn't going to warrant $1,000.
Well, that one was really good. That
Yeah,
was, very
so if you listen to
memorable.
past episodes, like every year or two, I gave out $1,000. Another year somebody did for a project in high school or college, Route 66. And then even for the little kids, like first graders drawing pictures, that was very, very time consuming, but it's a shame that nobody took advantage of that. So, yeah. Well, thank you again. Thank you for coming.
Well, I enjoyed all your podcasts.
And check out some great books here at the public library.